Nobody at Mercy General Hospital took Sarah Chen seriously. Not on her first day, not on her 100th, and certainly not on the night everything changed. At 5'3" and barely 110 pounds, Sarah didn't look like much walking through the emergency room doors in her navy blue scrubs. Her black hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her voice was soft. Her smile was kind. To most people, she looked like she'd blow over in a stiff wind. "Here comes the rookie," Derek Matthews would say whenever Sarah entered the break room. Derek was the senior nurse on the night shift, a thick-necked former college football player who never let anyone forget it. Better not give her anything too scary. Might run crying to her mama. The other nurses would laugh. Not mean laughs exactly, but not friendly either. Sarah was different from them, and they made sure she knew it. What none of them knew was that before Sarah became a nurse, she had been Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, United States Army, with 2 tours in Afghanistan under her belt. She had run field hospitals in combat zones. She had treated wounded soldiers while mortar rounds shook the walls. She had held dying men's hands and whispered comfort while bullets sang overhead. But Sarah never talked about any of that. She had left the military 3 years ago, earned her nursing degree, and moved to the small town of Pinewood, Montana, hopping for peace and quiet. She wanted to help people without the weight of war on her shoulders. She wanted normal. Pinewood was about as normal as it got. Population 8,000, 1 main street, 2 traffic lights. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, which meant the hospital staff had all grown up together. They had gone to the same high school, dated each other's siblings, and shared 20 years of inside jokes. Sarah was the outsider, the new girl, the rookie who hadn't earned her place yet. "Don't take it personal," said Margaret, the oldest nurse on staff, one evening in late November. Margaret was the only one who showed Sarah any real kindness. "They just need time to warm up to you. You're doing fine work, honey, real fine work." Sarah smiled and thanked her, but she didn't really mind the cold shoulders. She had faced worse than workplace politics. Much worse. She just put her head down, did her job, and went home to her small apartment above the hardware store. The night it happened started like any other Saturday. The ER was busy but manageable. A kid with a broken arm from sledding. An elderly woman with chest pains that turned out to be heartburn. A drunk driver with minor cuts from a fender bender. Sarah took each patient with the same calm efficiency. She had learned in the Army that panic was contagious, and so was calm. She chose calm every single time. Around 11 o'clock, Dr. Morrison came out of exam room 3 looking frustrated. Dr. Morrison was a good doctor but not a patient man. "Sarah," he called out, "I need you to babysit the drunk in room 3. Just had to sedate him. He'll sleep it off, but I need someone to monitor his vitals every 15 minutes. Can you handle that?" "Yes, doctor," Sarah said simply. Derek snorted from the nurse's station. "Hope he doesn't wake up cranky. Rookie might faint." Sarah ignored him and went into room 3. The patient was a large man, maybe 6'2", with a beer belly and tattoos covering both arms. He was snoring loudly, sleeping off whatever he'd drunk and the sedative Dr. Morrison had given him. Sarah checked his vital signs, marked them on his chart, and settled into the chair by the door to wait. 15 minutes later she checked again. All normal. The man never stirred. But at 11:45, everything changed. The ambulance bay doors crashed open, and Sarah heard shouting. She stepped out of room 3 just in time to see the paramedics rushing in with a stretcher. "Coming through. Move, move, move." But there was no patient on the stretcher. Instead, walking beside it, barely controlled by 2 paramedics, was the biggest man Sarah had ever seen outside of a basketball court. He had to be 7 feet tall, maybe taller. His shoulders were as wide as a door frame. His hands were the size of dinner plates. He wore a torn flannel shirt and jeans, and his face was twisted with rage and pain. Blood streamed from a gash on his forehead. "Let go of me," he roared, his voice like thunder. "Sir, please, we're trying to help you," one of the paramedics pleaded, struggling to keep hold of the man's arm. The giant, because that's what he looked like, an actual giant, suddenly jerked his arm free. The paramedic went flying backward, crashing into a supply cart. Medical supplies scattered across the floor like dice. "I don't need help. I need to find that son of a..." The giant stopped mid-sentence, swaying on his feet. His eyes were wild, unfocused. Blood dripped steadily from the wound on his head, spattering on the white linoleum. Dr. Morrison rushed forward. "Sir, you're injured. You need to let us treat you." "Get away from me." The giant swung his massive arm in a wide arc. Dr. Morrison jumped back just in time. Sarah's military training kicked in instantly. She assessed the situation in seconds. Head wound, probably concussion. Pupils dilated unevenly. Confused, aggressive, disoriented. Classic signs of a serious head injury combined with possible intoxication. He was dangerous, but not because he was evil. He was dangerous because he was hurt and scared and didn't know where he was. Derek had gone pale. The other nurses had backed toward the far wall. Even the security guard, old Frank Peters, who was at least 65, looked ready to run. The giant took a step forward into the emergency room, and that's when Sarah saw it. His left leg buckled slightly with each step. He was favoring his right side. That head wound was worse than it looked, affecting his balance, his judgment, everything. He was going to hurt someone, or himself, or both. "We need to get everyone out," Derek whispered urgently. "Someone call the police." But Sarah was already moving, not away from the giant, toward him. "Sarah," Margaret hissed, "what are you doing?" Sarah didn't answer. She walked slowly, steadily, directly into the giant's path. She kept her hands visible, palms open, non-threatening. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but clear. "Hey there," she said. "My name is Sarah. You're hurt. I can see that. That cut on your head looks painful." The giant's wild eyes fixed on her. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd thought. He could have picked her up with one hand, could have thrown her across the room without breaking a sweat. "Who are you?" he growled. "I'm a nurse. I'm here to help you. What's your name?" Don't want help." His words were slurring together now. His face had gone pale under the blood and grime. Need to find." He swayed dangerously. Sarah could see it happening the way she'd seen it happen to wounded soldiers. The adrenaline was wearing off. The injury was catching up to him. He was about to collapse. But a 7-foot, 300-pound man falling was like a tree going down. Anyone in his path would be crushed. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice still calm, still steady, "you're about to fall. Let me help you sit down before you get hurt worse." "I'm fine," he roared, but even as he said it, his knees buckled. He started to fall forward, directly toward Sarah. Behind her, someone screamed. But Sarah had been trained for this. She had caught falling soldiers in full combat gear. She had stabilized wounded men twice her size while under fire. She knew exactly what to do. She didn't try to catch him. That would have been impossible. Instead, as he fell, she stepped in close, got under his center of gravity, and used his own momentum against him. She grabbed his right arm, twisted her body, and guided his fall. The giant went down, but not in a heap. Sarah controlled his descent, turning him as he dropped so that he landed on his back instead of his face. She went down with him, one knee braced against the floor, her hand still gripping his arm and shoulder. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. The giant lay on his back on the emergency room floor, blinking up at the fluorescent lights. Sarah knelt beside him, her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing under her palm. "You're okay," she said softly. "You're safe, just stay down, let us help you." The fight went out of him all at once. His eyes filled with tears. "My head hurts," he whispered, and suddenly he didn't sound like a giant at all. He sounded like a scared kid. I know, Sarah said. We're going to fix that. Dr. Morrison, I need a gurney here now. Possible skull fracture, definitely concussed, and let's get a trauma room ready. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The entire emergency room had gone silent. Everyone stared at the tiny nurse kneeling beside the giant, her hand still on his chest, keeping him calm, keeping him still. Dr. Morrison snapped out of his shock first. You heard her move. The staff sprang into action. Within minutes, they had the giant, his name was Thomas Briggs, they learned from his wallet, on a gurney and wheeling into Trauma Bay 1. Sarah stayed with him the whole time, her small hand wrapped around his massive one, talking to him quietly, keeping him calm while Dr. Morrison examined the head wound. It was bad. Skull fracture, just like Sarah had suspected. He needed surgery, needed it fast. They called in the neurosurgeon and prepped Thomas for emergency transport to the regional hospital 40 miles away. Through it all, Sarah stayed with him, even though Derek could have taken over, even though any of the other nurses could have done it. She stayed because Thomas kept holding her hand, kept looking at her with scared, grateful eyes. Thank you, he whispered as they loaded him into the ambulance. You didn't run away. No, Sarah said, squeezing his hand one last time. I don't run. When Sarah walked back into the emergency room, everything had changed. The staff stood in a small cluster by the nurse's station, and when she approached, they parted like a curtain. Every single one of them was staring at her differently now, not with dismissal, not with barely concealed contempt. With respect. Derek opened his mouth twice before any words came out. That was, how did you, I mean. I did what needed to be done, Sarah said simply. She picked up Thomas Briggs's chart and started documenting what had happened, her handwriting neat and precise. But he was huge, one of the younger nurses said, and you took him down like it was nothing. Sarah looked up from the chart. I didn't take him down, I helped him down, there's a difference. He was hurt and scared, he needed help, not force. Dr. Morrison was looking at her with new eyes too. Where did you learn to do that? Handle someone that size? Sarah hesitated. She had kept her past private for so long, but maybe it was time to let them see a little bit of who she really was. I served in the army, she said quietly. Field medic, 2 tour in Afghanistan. You learn to handle all kinds of situations. The silence that followed was profound. Margaret was the first to speak and her voice was warm. Well, I'll be damned. Our rookie is a war hero. I'm not a hero, Sarah said quickly. I was just doing my job, same as tonight. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the air, in the way people looked at her. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Word spread quickly through the hospital. By morning, everyone knew the story of how the tiny new nurse had taken down a 7-foot giant without breaking a sweat. Sarah tried to downplay it. She really did. But every time she turned around, someone wanted to shake her hand, pat her shoulder, buy her coffee. Derek was the most changed of all. When Sarah came in for her next shift 3 days later, he actually pulled out a chair for her in the break room. Listen, he said, his voice gruff but sincere, I've been a real jerk to you. All that rookie stuff, all those jokes, I was out of line. Sarah studied his face. He meant it, she could see that. Why? She asked simply. Derek ran a hand through his hair. Honestly, I think I felt threatened. You came in here so quiet, so competent, never complaining, never asking for special treatment. Made me feel like maybe I'd been coasting, taking advantage of seniority instead of actually being good at my job. He met her eyes. You're twice the nurse I am, and you've been here 1/10 of the time. That's hard for a guy to admit. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. You're a good nurse, Derek. I've watched you work. You care about your patients. That's what matters. Yeah, well, he smiled, a real smile this time. Maybe we could both be good, work together instead of me being an idiot. I'd like that, Sarah said. And just like that, she wasn't the rookie anymore. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A week later, Thomas Briggs came back to Mercy General. He walked through the front door on his own 2 feet, his head bandaged but healing, and asked for Sarah Chen. She met him in the lobby, and up close with him, healthy and sober, she could see he wasn't as old as she'd thought. Maybe 35. He had kind eyes, she realized. Sad eyes. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said. His voice was deep but gentle now, nothing like the roar from that night. "The doctor said if I hadn't gotten help when I did, if that head injury had gone untreated much longer, I might not have made it." "I'm glad you're okay," Sarah said. "What happened that night, if you don't mind me asking?" Thomas's face clouded over. "Bar fight. Stupid, really. Guy kept pushing me, saying things about my size. Trying to get a reaction. Finally did. I pushed back, slipped, cracked my head on the corner of a table." He shook his head. "Woke up in the ambulance not knowing where I was, just feeling scared and angry and hurt. I'm so sorry for what I put you all through." "You were injured," Sarah said. "You weren't yourself." "That little nurse, the one who talked to me, who helped me." Thomas looked around. "That was you, wasn't it? They told me, but I couldn't believe it. You're so small, and I'm—" "Size doesn't matter as much as people think," Sarah said with a small smile. "What matters is knowing what to do and staying calm when you do it." Thomas laughed, a big booming sound that made people turn and look, but it was a happy sound. "My mother is going to love you," he said. "She's been after me to thank you properly. Would you let us buy you dinner, please? She won't give me a moment's peace until I ask." Sarah started to decline, but something in Thomas's face stopped her. He needed this. Needed to make amends, to turn a terrible night into something better. "All right," she said. "Dinner would be nice." That dinner changed everything. Thomas's mother, Helen Briggs, was a tiny woman who barely came up to Sarah's shoulder. She owned the local diner on Main Street, the one Sarah passed every day but had never gone into. "You saved my boy," Helen said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Sarah tight. "You saved my baby, and I will never ever forget that." Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Sarah learned that Thomas was actually one of the gentlest people in Pinewood. He coached Little League. He volunteered at the animal shelter. That bar fight had been completely out of character, and he'd stopped drinking entirely since the accident. "He gets that from his father," Helen said proudly. "Big man, gentle heart. Passed away 5 years ago, but he would have loved you, Sarah. You're exactly his kind of people. Brave and kind." Word of the dinner spread, as everything did in a small town. And suddenly, people Sarah had never met were waving to her on the street. The owner of the hardware store knocked $50 off her rent. The librarian saved her the new mystery novels. The guy at the gas station never charged her for air when she filled her tires. She had become part of Pinewood without even trying. But the biggest change came at the hospital. 2 weeks after the incident, Dr. Morrison called Sarah into his office. She went nervously, wondering if somehow she'd broken some rule she didn't know about. Instead, he offered her the position of trauma coordinator for the emergency department. "It's a promotion," he said. "More responsibility, more pay, and frankly, you've earned it. The way you handled that situation showed leadership, quick thinking, and courage. Those are exactly the qualities we need in a trauma coordinator." Sarah stared at him. "But I've only been here 4 months." "And in those 4 months, you've proven yourself more capable than nurses with 20 years' experience. Derek actually came to me himself and said you deserve it. So did Margaret. So did everyone else on staff." Dr. Morrison smiled. "You're not the rookie anymore, Sarah. You're one of us, and we need you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. After 3 years of trying to find her place in the civilian world, after months of being dismissed and underestimated, she had finally found where she belonged. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Dr. Morrison said. That night the staff threw Sarah a surprise party in the break room. There was cake from Helen's diner, balloons, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Trauma Coordinator Chen." Derek raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Sarah," he said, "who taught us all that heroes come in all sizes." Everyone cheered. Margaret hugged her tight and whispered in her ear, "I knew you were special from day one, honey. I just knew." Sarah looked around at the smiling faces, at these people who had become her colleagues, her friends, her family. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the deserts of Afghanistan to the mountains of Montana, from staff sergeant to nurse to trauma coordinator, from outsider to insider. She had left the military looking for peace, looking for a place where her past didn't define her, where she could start fresh. But she had learned something important in these past few months. You don't start fresh by hiding who you are. You start fresh by being exactly who you are and letting that be enough. The girl who had been too small for the basketball team in high school. The soldier who had been told she'd never make it through basic training. The nurse who had been called rookie with barely concealed contempt. She was all of those things, and she was so much more. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same emergency room where everything had changed. It was a quiet Tuesday night, the calm before the storm of the weekend. Derek walked past carrying a chart and paused. "Hey, Coordinator Chen, got a question about the new trauma protocol." Sarah smiled. "Sure, what's up?" As they discussed procedures, the ambulance bay doors opened. A paramedic rushed in with a patient on a stretcher, shouting about a car accident, possible internal bleeding, critical condition. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. "Trauma Bay 2, she called out, her voice calm and clear and absolutely in command. "Derek, get Dr. Morrison. Margaret, prep for surgery. Move, people." The staff moved like a well-oiled machine, everyone knowing their role, everyone trusting each other. And Sarah was right there in the middle of it, small but mighty, underestimated no more. The patient was saved that night, and the next night, and the night after that. Because Sarah Chen had learned a long time ago, in the dust and heat of a war zone far from home, that courage isn't about size. It's about showing up. It's about doing what needs to be done when everyone else wants to run. It's about being exactly who you are, no matter how small the world tries to make you feel.